live stream link has just been pressed.
Okay, so let me formally open this meeting of NHS England's board and welcome all colleagues to the meeting. Nicola, would you just run through who we've got present on the call, please?
I will do, Chair. We have Andrew George, Callum Pallister, David Farrelly, Dolores Agostini-Quashie, Ella Clifford, Giles Denham, Jack Farina, Joe Lenihan, Jordan Hornby, Jules Woodcock, Liz Mear, Lee Whitehead, Mark Bradford, Navina Evans, Patrick Mitchell, Rob Smith, Samuel Grant, Soraya Dillon, Vicky Diaz and Wendy Reid. We have apologies today, Chair, from Laura Roberts, and I'm expecting Sir Andrew Morris to join us as soon as he's free from his 9 o'clock meeting.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. And I think we've got Julie Woodcock and Sam Grant joining us from our LGBTQ plus group. So particularly welcome to Julia and to Sam as well. And I think we're due to get Keith Wright from the Department of Health. So a welcome.
He's just joined.
Well, a welcome to Keith as well. So thank you, colleagues, for that. So can I turn to item 2, which is declarations of interest. The register is available. It's published as part of our board papers. Are there any updates any members of the board wish to make to the declarations of interest, or are we content with that statement as recorded at item 2? No. Content. Okay, thank you. Let's note that. So if I can now go on to item 3, which is approval of the minutes from our meeting on the 19th of January. I'll not turn each page on them, but are we content with the detail of the minutes from the 19th? Yeah, Soraya, Rob, I can see nodding, so thank you to that. Are there any matters arising which don't occur during the course of our agenda that any colleague wishes to raise? No? Are we okay? All right, so if we could accept those as a true record of the meeting. Nicola, thank you to you for producing those in the level of detail that you've given to us. So item 5 on our agenda is an update from committee chairs. So the first item is the performance committee. Andrew, this is you. Is there anything you want to draw our attention to, either from the notes of this meeting, which I think was in December? I know you've had a meeting since then, so anything from that meeting you might want to update us on?
Thank you, David. And yes, the last meeting was on the 8th of February, and both David and Navina joined us for the meeting, as well as some clinical colleagues. I think that there's no detail I would like to bring from that meeting. I think I'd like to say that we are getting to the place where we are beginning to settle the details of how performance reporting is happening. And so as far as the board goes, we're looking at making sure that there is more narrative highlighting the mitigations and the expectations of the mitigations coming out of it. And we're going to be trialling some of that within the Performance Assurance Committee between now and the next meeting offline. I think there's also a realization, something that's come together, which is, I think, is an overall sense of the last 2 meetings, is that there's a lot of really good stuff that's being done. We saw an accountability framework, we saw a benefits management operations framework, all of which are absolutely in the right direction and looking very good. But what we need to do is make sure that from the point of view of the person on the ground who's leading a project or leading a program, it looks joined up. And so it doesn't look like we're taking 25 different bites out of them, all of which are slightly different, but that it looks as though it's coherent and joined up. And so I think these are really good foundations for us now to then put this together in an overall framework so people understand what's happening. I think that's all I'd have to say, though. If either Naveen or yourself, David, wanted to comment on the having visited the meeting, that would be excellent as well.
No, thank you, John, and thanks for the work that you and colleagues are doing there. I agree with you. There's a huge amount of work going on, and I think we'll be in a much better place as an organisation as a consequence of that. So I was greatly encouraged by being able to join you for your discussions and conversations, and I'm very optimistic that that work will come to fruition, and that coordination that you talked about and the narrative on mitigation actions will be a key part of what comes forward. So I thought it was very, very good, and I enjoyed the tone and the spirit of the conversation as well. I think there's a lot of really good energy and effort going into actually designing the framework for us, and I congratulate you, Andrew, and thank you as well for leading this work for us along with David Farrelly and executive colleagues. So very, very good. Okay, so let's go to the Audit and Risk Committee minutes, the minutes here are from the 21st of October, but I know John has also chaired a meeting since that date as well. So, John, is there anything you want to draw out to be the minutes which are before us or your last meeting?
Not particularly, in terms of, I think as a lot of work been going on, a lot of internal audit work has been progressing quite well. The COVID risk register, obviously we're looking at that as well a bit later. I think the work around the risk register is progressing extremely well. I suppose the main thing that's come out of it is we're actually having an additional meeting of the audit committee, basically look at the renewal of the internal audit contract that is coming up. So we've taken that slightly offline and going to have a separate meeting of that. And of course, the business assurance framework will also pick that up in the additional meeting. So there was a lot of business, but it was pretty regular business in terms of where we are. Nothing particularly came out through the processes of both this meeting and the follow-on meeting that caused us any particular pain or anguish. As I say, the real issue now is to look at the renewal of the internal audit contract.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for John? Callum, is there anything you want to say?
Not really, no. As John says, internal audit contract is up for renewal, but we've already had actually some really good conversations over email between non-executives around that, and I think we'll be able to take that process forward smoothly. I agree. Very productive meeting. Yeah,
I think there's a very good rhythm in the Audit and Risk Committee, and good continuity, and as I say, a well-designed programme which is being executed. A bit of interruption due to COVID and some of the restrictions, but nevertheless, I think the quality of the audit work is very, very high. And the pleasing thing is we're not just asking people to look at some of the things we know are working well. We're asking the internal audit to look at things which are challenging and not working as well, and using that as a lever for improvement. So again, I think hugely productive work, and appointment and retendering of auditors is an important thing to ensure we can get some continuity of that work as well. So thank you, John Latham, for the leadership that you give it, and Callum for your work as well. So that finally brings to the People Committee, and again, the minutes we've got here from the 12th of October, but there has been a meeting since then. Nicola, do you want to come in?
If I could, Chair, just to say that Andrew Foster won't be able to join us until around 10 a.m. this morning, so we may want to ask one of the other members to give an update on the last meeting held.
Okay. Liz and Harpreet, that looks like that's falling to you on the basis that Laura, I know, is not well and is not here. So process of elimination.
To say something if needed too.
Sorry, Nicola.
I think Lee's prepped to give an overview.
Oh, Lee is. Okay. All right. Lee, over to you.
Thank you, David. So, as you say, the meeting notes here are from the October meeting and are therefore to be read. We have had another meeting since, in which we furthered conversation around RES metrics, but also WEDES metrics. And as we discussed at the last board, we had a further conversation about best place to work as an update. So those things that we discussed at the last board were taken back to the most recent meeting, and we are carrying on the work to meet the RES and WEDES metrics we discussed at the last People Committee, as well as being joined by colleagues from the BAME network and a colleague from NHS England to have a further discussion around BAME issues.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. Any questions or comments to Lee from colleagues? Lee, I've got one. When will the future of work piece of work be completed? I just think this is important, and there's a much more general conversation going on about the future of work and what are the changes that have arisen as a result of lockdown that will get locked in. And it'd be, I think, really important for the board as well as the executive team in your own meetings to actually be giving consideration to what have we learned over the past 12 plus months. What do we keep of that? What do we do differently as we go on through 21 and into 22?
Yeah, thanks, David. So the procurement process did not go as smoothly as we would have hoped. So we had to do a second round of procurement. We've now shortlisted companies to provide that work, and there's some interviews in the diary over the next couple of weeks. I think Soraya is also helping us deliver that bit of work. And then once we've appointed somebody, they have about 8 weeks to deliver the consultancy we require. And obviously we're also working with other ALBs who are doing a similar work to make sure that we don't cover the same ground in the same way. So I know NHS England have done some work around this. We were talking to NICE and various others around the same bit of work, so we can share. And we're also talking to NHS Property Services to make sure we factor in some work they're doing about the future of the office as well. But the plan is to have it hopefully done over the next couple of months once we've completed this latest bit of procurement.
So perhaps we could bring something to either the June or the July meeting of the board, which will give the exec team some chance to take the report and actually have some discussion and debate over any recommendations that come out of it, collate what some others are doing in relation to the future of work, and then perhaps bring it back here. And if Soraya can be the non-executive director linked with that work, then that would help tremendously. Soraya, are you okay with that?
Sorry, thank you, Sir David. Yeah, absolutely. And I think certainly the stage we've got to, all of the potential applicants are showing a very good engagement process with staff. So this will be very much learning from and also getting people's feelings in about how things should move forward. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, good. It's a hugely important discussion, I think, and I know many sectors and many organisations are actually engaging with exactly this question about what is the learning we keep. So thanks. Lee, thank you for that. Soraya, thanks. So if that brings us to the end of item 5, next item is Navina's. I see your latest briefing. You were counting day 95 out of 100. So over to you, Navina, on day 95, or is it 96? But anyway, whichever. Over to you.
The counting is coming to an end. You'll be pleased to hear. Thank you very much. I'm going to just run through my update. We're coming to the end of this financial year. So we are doing a review of all the work that we've done this last year and beginning our planning for 2021-2022 with an aim to bring the business plan to the board in March. Obviously, our planning for next year is different from the way it's been in the past. We have to work very closely and be really agile and responsive to the needs of recovery of service. And with that in mind, we continue to work very closely with our partners in the Department of Health and Social Care and with NHS England Improvement to ensure that we are properly responsive to the needs of service as we make sure that we agree our priorities. We also accept that we will have to be agile over the year as we understand the nature of the needs within service. With that in mind, the discussions around the settlement and COVID costs, etc., are still ongoing. So I'll move on now to give you some news about what we've been up to. The National People Board had our first meeting on the 4th of February. It's a refreshed board. It's cross-system board, and it has some really good representation from system leaders on the board. I am the co-chair, together with Prerna Issa, Chief People Officer, and both of our organisations are working very closely as a team to support the work of the People Board and the next steps of the People Plan. It's sponsored by you, Sir David, and Sir Andrew Morris as the interim chair for NHS Improvement, and Lee McDonough, Director General at the department. And so it's really helpful to have the three perspectives giving us direction and support. The board intends to meet every 2 months with a lot of work going on in between times, and also then develop a work plan. We have 6 meetings in the diary, at the end of which we will do a review of where we've got to with the plan and what we should do next. So as we develop the plan, we will bring it here to our HEE board to share and take feedback. I'd like to say something now about the Task and Finish group for HEE's digital ambition to be digital first organisation. We had 2 meetings of 6 of the Task and Finish group, the first on Friday and the second yesterday. It's co-chaired by myself and Liz Meir. And also we have Andrew George and Harpreet offering non-executive scrutiny, challenge and support to us, which is really welcome, because otherwise we could go in all directions, because there's a lot of enthusiasm from the organisation to really take us and move forward in this direction. We are looking at 3 particular areas, how we make sure that our people in HEE are ready and able to take on the challenges of being a digital first organisation, how it affects our business, all of our business, and also how it supports our impact on students, learners, and also the learning environment, etc. So it's quite a big ask, which is why we have set up the Task and Finish group to really understand and come up with a plan, at the end of which we will bring something back to board for further discussion of how we're going to move forward and make sure we bring updates for assurance. So that we plan for that to happen around about July time. We'll factor that into the forward plan. Moving on to the Health and Care Bill White Paper, the board will have noted that there was the publication last week setting out the legislative proposals for the new bill. We have been involved in the discussions leading up to the bill, and we were able to make sure that despite the changes to the LETBs in the local education and training boards in legislation, we were keen to make sure that we preserved the important functions and that they were incorporated into the new arrangements for planning and supporting the current and future workforce. So we will continue to work very closely with our partners, especially within the regional structures, to make sure that that is the case. Next, something about some good news around supporting staff and business as usual for HEE through this last month of the pandemic work. National Apprenticeship Week was the 8th to the 14th of February, and we had a lot of activity. And we're really pleased that despite all the other work that is been dominating our minds in the NHS, we still managed to do quite a lot in supporting the apprenticeship pathway. And we're really hopeful that this will be something that we will pick up in the recovery phase next year as a real opportunity for people joining the NHS and for the new future workforce. I just want a little plug for HEE. We have 4.5% of our total workforce in HEE are apprentices. And I'm really keen that we now focus on what happens to them and follow them through after their apprenticeship, and how we support people that go through the apprenticeship at HEE. Quick mention for the HEE Population Health Fellows, really important because this is for me, it's really important because this is in the area of population health. And so really keen to share that there is work going on in this field with our fellows. And also want to share some really lovely feedback which Mike Curtis received around future leaders and the development in a new course, Enhanced Paediatric Nursing Skills. And it's really about the leadership aspects of the work that our staff do. And it was really good to get that kind of feedback, and a really important for us to be reminded that we are involved in creating sort of all-rounded clinicians and staff for the NHS. Just to confirm, last month we brought the Pulse stakeholder survey and we shared the summary findings. And the plan is that we're going to go away and do some work around how we're going to action some of the suggestions that were brought to our attention during that survey. And we propose that we bring back in July, 6 months on, our actions and progress that we've made in line with the suggestions. I think I'll stop there. Quite a lot for the last few weeks.
No, very good, Navina. Thank you for that, and very clear presentation as well. So let me open up for questions, comments, and I'm going to start running a book on whether it's Andrew, George or Soraya with the first question, but I think it was Andrew this week. So Andrew, over to you, please. And carry on asking.
Glad to know that my reflexes are still up to it, and you know, when I slip down the thing, you can worry about my condition. Navina, excellent news about the apprentices. Really pleased. I'd just like to find out some more detail in several ways. I mean, 4.5% of the total workforce is fantastic. I guess it'd be interesting to know what sort of roles they're filling, what level apprentices they are. And this might be something that comes into a later report, I'm not saying. And I'm also personally interested as well in the schemes that HE was sponsoring in other organisations about 18 months ago around apprenticeships for people with disabilities or mental health issues. And at that time, that while we were sponsoring that in other organisations, it hadn't yet bled across into our own organisation, yet there was a generalised feeling that it should do. So I was just interested in your thoughts around that one, but that might be too detailed and you need to bring that back to another meeting, I'd understand.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Let me take all of them, Navina, should I? And then I'll let you have the last word on this. Soraya, please.
Thank you. And Navina, thank you for that update. And particularly pleasing is the link now with you co-chairing the People Board to make sure that we're not going to be working, at sort of silos or different levels. Could you say a little bit about the infrastructure lower down at regional level and any plans at ICS level? Because I feel that is going to be critical to make sure that we've got the right feeds coming up. And then just off the back of Andrew George's question on apprenticeships, I presume then that we have managed to use the apprenticeship levy effectively. I assume the apprenticeship levy is still there, Callum. So, question really.
Yeah, very good, Soraya. And I think your point in the white paper with the future direction signalled of ICS on a statutory basis, then the conversation about the workforce implications of that and the education and training, I think is very apposite. So thank you for raising that point. Liz Meir, please.
Yeah, so I was going to come in, Sir David, about the apprentices, to say fantastic news and great that we're encouraging people into HE through that route. Also to say the People Board, fantastic that you're co-chairing. So, but the other thing was about the Digital First Task and Finish group. So I think you highlighted, Navina, where co-chairs, very lively group, lots of inputs into that group about how we can support HE to do that. So I think this is going to be a really great opportunity to change the culture, to think about how we do things differently, so we support staff and support our learners.
Yeah, and the connection with the future of work and the digital first is a nice juxtaposition between Lee's briefing and Navina's briefing on that as well. So thanks, Liz. Lee, over to you, please.
Thanks, David. So just following up on the apprenticeship week, we did quite a lot of promotion of this. So the 4.5% that Navina mentioned makes us the highest performing ALB with apprenticeships in our own workforce. It also moved us into the top 100 employers of apprenticeships in the country. So I think we can say that we ticked the box in terms of walking the walk on that one. We did work, we had a Facebook live session which had over 7,000 people taking part. We went to the National Apprenticeship Show, and you'll be delighted to know that our presentation was the most popular there, receiving more questions than the RAF, Sky or KPMG, to name but a few. We got coverage of the Health Careers team, had a 58% increase in unique visitors to their website, having promoted work around apprenticeships. We also did work in the Northwest and the Northeastern Yorkshire, increasing their normal Twitter audience by over 100,000. So we really did do a lot of work around Apprenticeship Week across a full range of channels, and we got interviews in FE Week from Laura, and picked up by other outlets as well, and a whole range of case studies from 14 of our own apprenticeships. So it's just to show that we put the work in, and the results are there in the numbers of the people who are now working for us as apprenticeships, and we want to carry on doing that.
Lee, could you just pick up on Andrew George's point about the types of roles that the apprentices are coming into? Navina might touch on this as well, but I suspect you might be a bit closer to this. I think some of them are working in the areas that you're responsible for.
Absolutely. We have a full range of people working across HE. I've got, in my old directorate, I think I had 12 working in different bits of the directorate. And most other colleagues have people working in their directorates. Some of them, so for instance, Oliver Inwards was one of the people that we profiled during the week, is a level 6 chartered management degree apprentice, working, I think, in Rob's directorate, but I could be wrong. But we do have people in a whole range of tasks. And when we ask people to bid for apprenticeships, everybody came forward and wanted these people working with them, to the extent that we've just put out again for next year's, and again are getting a similar response from across the organisation. Yeah. But I can get more details with actual numbers and where they all sit and send that around to colleagues over the next few days.
Yeah, it'd be worth a note going to colleagues. I think there's people working in HR as well, which I mean, the key point is these are real jobs. Yes. That people are filling and contributing to the organisation, as well as individuals getting the experience. And I think I've met some incredibly talented young people that have joined us on apprenticeships. Harpreet.
Thank you, David. And just wanted to pick up on that. I think, it's a really important moment to congratulate on the apprenticeship, because, again, it is a fantastic model. And I think often we do not do it enough justice. And I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity to, not only communicate that externally, but also use this as a learning opportunity. I remember when working on the NHS Digital Academy, we were looking at the apprenticeship model, and it just was very complex to understand. And the fact that we've made it happen and hired apprenticeships through this route, I think is a testament to highlight that and raise the profile of the people that are coming through, and the fact that we use this vehicle to point individuals, which I think is a moment to celebrate and highlight from a communications perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Harpreet. John Latham, please.
Yeah, it's just picking up on Soraya's point. I was going to ask about the levy and how much we spent, on the levy and how much we got back. And I suppose that the reverse question for me on that is how much more have we got to go at? This is it's a great achievement. That's a significant percentage, but the question always is there more that we could do? And particularly if you look at the profile across the organisations, are there bits of the organisation that maybe are not using it as much as they could?
Yeah, no, very good. Callum, I don't know whether you can pick up on this, but Navina, I'll come to you. But I hope Laura Roberts' ears are burning, because I know she's been a great champion for this work and taking this forward. And I know it's a wider effort than that, but Laura really has driven this forward. So congratulations to Laura. And I'm just sorry she's not here to bask in some of the positive comments that are being made about the progress that has been secured on this. But Navina, over to you. Plenty to go at there, but I'm sure you can help in the points that have been raised by colleagues on your report. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll start with the quick one, which is the people board infrastructure question. So at all the 7 regional levels, they have set up regional people boards, and our regional colleagues, leadership at HEE leadership, are well embedded at that level. And then each region is having its own arrangement with their ICSs. So we will get more detail through the People Directorate, and how that's working, and then how they're delivering this year's people plan. There's a delivery board that works to do that, and we have David Farrelly and relevant colleagues part of that, as and when David's there all the time to do the delivery part of it. So that's the infrastructure at the moment, but I suspect it will develop and grow as things get better embedded. If I move to the questions about the apprenticeships, just listening to all the conversation, I think 3 things perhaps. I'm going to suggest that in Laura's absence, that she has to bring a paper to a future board meeting, because I think it's actually really important point and timely that we have a proper discussion about all aspects to do with apprenticeships, both internally in HEE, but also what we do as an organisation to support the proper adoption of and rollout of apprenticeships and its impact in the recovery space going forward. Certainly, there's a lot of appetite for this. We had a meeting with a team from the All Parliamentary Group looking at apprenticeships. So there's a real opportunity to really raise the profile. For me personally, in HEE, I think it is, so we want to look for the right people with the right skills, and we must not always look in the same old way, in the same old places. And I think apprenticeships really offer that opportunity. In the People Committee, we talked about our recruitment processes, and we're going to look at that and how kind of inclusive they are. And again, I think apprenticeships is an opportunity for us to really challenge ourselves. How well do we do? I think we are celebrating because we've done really well, but there's a lot more that we can do. So I would like to propose that we bring a more detailed report for discussion and challenge and scrutiny, and also to support us to be much more bold in our ambition in this area. I don't know, Callum, you want to say anything about the levy for this year?
I don't actually have those figures, I'm afraid, but we can share.
Put that into the report.
I'm sure Laura would have them if she was here.
Yeah, she will know it backwards.
Okay. Any more, Navina?
Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so thank you for your report. And you've got a paragraph called other activity as well, which you didn't address, but I just want to recognise just how much is going on and how much you're doing personally to actually provide leadership as well. So thank you for flagging that update. So I now come to item 7, which is the best place to work. I don't know how we're going to bridge into this. Lee, are you providing a link into this item? Or am I just going straight to Julia and Sam?
I think straight to Julia and Sam.
Navina, do you want to come in?
May I just do a very brief introduction? Yeah, because normally Laura would do it if she was here. So just want to really welcome Julia and Sam, and thank you very much for coming to help the board in our work. And particularly it's about our efforts to improve inclusion and diversity. It's LGBTQ plus History Month, and there's a lot of activity going on in the organisation, and we are working hard to challenge ourselves using the standards that are set out by Stonewall. So there's quite a lot of work, and we've made good progress, but we've got quite a way to go. And we're hoping that, and we intend that this presentation this morning will help the board to think through with us what more we need to do going forward. So that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. So over to Julia and Sam. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Navina. Julia and Sam, I think as a board, we feel it's really important that we're able to listen to the lived experiences of staff who work within the organisation, colleagues who work within the organisation. And we've had a number of colleagues from the staff networks present to us. So it's a real pleasure that you're able to join us this morning and share your thoughts and lived experience. It's not always easy to do this at a board, particularly one which is public. So I just want to acknowledge your courage in stepping forward to do this as well. So thank you very much. So without further ado, I don't know how you're going to do this between you, but over to you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna just kick off, introduce myself and Jules will, and then we've kind of split up the slides between us. So we've got a bit of an order to this. So I'm Sam Grant. I work in the Quality, Patient Safety and Commissioning team in the London region. I'm one of the deputy commissioning managers there. So that's my normal job at HE. But obviously I have a voluntary role where I'm one of the joint chairs for the London and South East Regional Heroes LGBTQ staff network group, but also have a role as well where we're calling it chairs of the chairs. So I kind of look after the rest of the chairs and do a lot of the liaison and work with on a national level for our staff network presence. Jules?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jules Woodcock. I'm in my day job, I'm the head of function for training programme management in the Northwest region, and my secondary role that I'm here today, my voluntary role, is one of the co-chairs of the Heroes North group. So thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you.
Yes, so just to obviously say a big thank you from me as well. I think this is a great opportunity for us to have visibility and a voice at something like the board meeting. So thank you for that. Just to give a bit of an overview of what we'd kind of like to try to cover off with you today is just giving a bit of an overview of Heroes, so the networks themselves, how we work, what do we do, and what does that look like at a regional level as well. Especially to give a highlight to History Month. As Navina has said, February is LGBT plus History Month. So we'd like to talk about some of the activity that's been going on for us as staff, and some of the kind of the key themes or kind of things that have come out from some of the events and information sharing we've had so far. We'd then like to finish just thinking about Stonewall Workplace Equality Index, how we're working with our diversity, inclusion and widening participation team on that, and then finish with any questions that anybody would like to raise with us today. Hopefully we can answer anything that you would like to talk to us about. So to start with a bit of an overview, so when we use the term heroes, what we mean is Health Education England's Rainbow organisation. We are an LGBTQ plus staff network. We support the community in HE, making sure that it's visible for all lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans and non-binary members of staff, and others who identify with any minority or differing sexual orientations or gender expressions or identities. And of course, all of our networks, we really welcome the inclusion and participation of any allies as well across HE. What we try to do as networks, we look to kind of connect different colleagues together throughout the organisations, understanding that we come to work and a lot of the time you don't kind of meet like-minded people all of the time. So using staff networks as a way to really bring lots of different staff members together to enable that networking, and as well as a lot of peer support as well. We do provide some type of kind of counselling support throughout the organisation for any staff who's looking for advice. We do a lot of lobbying for action and escalate any particular LGBT issues. And we do this through very close connections and close working with our DIMP team. We also look at raising awareness around particular issues, supporting development and engagement with colleagues and externally as well. And we also look to how can we better support those colleagues at HE that want to become an ally to our staff network. And also, as we've just mentioned, we're also very invested in working around the Best Place to Work initiative for HE as well.
So,
yeah, sorry, Jules.
No, that's okay. So in terms of the structure, the London and South East group that Sam is part of has been established since 2017, so very well established. But there wasn't any groups in any of the other regions until last year. So where we had a flurry of activity with Midlands, East of England, and finally the North group setting up. So that's been fantastic, really, and there's, I think, particularly during whilst we've all been in lockdown, has sort of provided great connection and support to each other. And the London and South East group have been very supportive with helping other regions set up. So really the only area of coverage that we don't currently have representation is in the Southwest, but I know the London and South East group have reached out to colleagues in the Southwest region to invite them to join in their activities as well. So we hope between us we provide full coverage. Each of the regions has 2 co-chairs and a steering group. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute, but as part of us becoming more coordinated and working more coherently, particularly with the DIMP team, then that's why we've set up the National Chairs group that Sam mentioned to help us better sort of coordinate our activities. So the regional groups particularly encourage members. We run events, we provide a forum for support. We've got the co-chairs and a steering group, and we also very grateful for support of senior champions from different areas, including the board, I think. We've set up a quite extensive SharePoint site, which is a great resource for us to be able to engage with our members and provide information for any members of staff who want to find out more about LGBT issues, as well as the events and activities that we have going on. And since the appointment of the DIP regional managers, then that's really enabled the connection at a more of a regional level, and each of us is working closely with the relevant manager for our area on LGBT issues, as well as joining in with the activities of the regional ahead groups. So we've talked a bit about support and connection and raising awareness, particularly through our regional events, I think. So, for example, in the North, we've done some lunch and learns, and there's other regional activities. Other regional teams are providing other activities. So, for example, in the Midlands, they've done events around health inequalities and trans awareness, amongst other things. So on top of that, we do some social activities. Obviously, in the past, it was face-to-face gatherings, but we focus more on quizzes, sharing film watch-alongs, and we've set up a book club this year. Previously, we've got involved in external awareness events like Pride. So I know in both London and Manchester, that has happened over the past few years. We work to lobby for change where we think that change is needed. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Workplace Equality Index later as well. The London and South East team have done quite a bit of fundraising and look after distribution of the rainbow badges for all of us. So we'll send the slides around later, but if people are interested in finding out more of the detail of what's on the SharePoint site, I've embedded the links here, but particularly draw attention to the LGBT books, films and documentary podcast suggestions, because that's a good way for people who want to find out more to learn more about our, share our lived experience, as it were. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you. So what you can see here is just a brief list of some of the events and ideas that are going on throughout History Month, so this month in February. So we've had a real fantastic talk with Jill Liddington, who's a historian and author, talking to us about who the real Anne Lister is. So some of you might remember, I think it was the BBC drama that was done around Anne Lister's real life, so Gentleman Jack. We've also had Dr. Michael Brady, who's the National Advisor for LGBT Health at NHS England Improvement, come in and do a talk for LGBT History Month, and that kind of kicked off February for us. And that talk really focused in on some of the health inequalities that are experienced by those that identify as LGBT and their sometimes quite negative experience of accessing healthcare. And I think that was a really quite poignant talk for a lot of staff that attended Dr. Michael Brady's event. We've also had an absolute fantastic charitable organisation called Mind Out, who are based in Brighton and Hove, come in and do a talk around mental health and well-being. They are obviously, as I said, based in Brighton and Hove, but during the pandemic have really found their feet on a virtual platform and providing lots of online support on a national level. And they came to us to give a really thorough talk on things like language and terminology that we should be thinking about and how we should use that in practice at work, and also talking to us about what can we do. So what can we do to support our LGBT colleagues, and also where can we go to find support ourselves. And again, quite a lot of really positive discussion with colleagues attending that. Later on this month, we've got a talk with Dr. Owen Carter, who is the champion GP with the LGBT Foundation and is working on the Pride in Practice programme that the LGBT Foundation run. And this is a particular programme that's targeted at general practice and GP practices and looking at how they become more inclusive sites, organisations for their LGBT community that they serve. We've got a bit of a spotlight on Alan Turing this month. For those that you don't know, he was one of the gay man who was kind of credited with really turning around our effort with World War II. And we do have and also another focus looking at microaggressions as well this month. Some of the key things that have come out from a few of these events, I think some takeaways for us as networks, but also wider as staff, is looking at some of the systems and processes that we have in HE and where can we maybe see some improvements or changes. One of the key things was looking at when we collect identifiable information, either about staff or about some of the trainees that we support and work with, do we have a gender neutral term for their title, which is MX? Is that included and visible on all of the systems that we use to collect that data? I think we found that it's not. that there are some systems that we use in HE that only have don't have gender neutral titles included. We know that obviously a lot of the doctors that we work with will have the the title of doctor, but just having that available in a drop-down list just shows that HE is taking this into consideration, and it is it's an available option for us. We're also looking at throughout this month is a lot of how do we re-engage or reinvigorate some participation with our membership, and also looking wider than that and looking at our executive colleagues to see how they can provide more visibility and support. And I think that's what we're using History Month as a bit of a platform for as well. We hopefully this won't be kind of a one-off, and we're looking to take a lot of the work that's come out from History Month and carry that forward throughout the rest of the year, either through communication channels or further events as well. So to think about Stonewall, so we've worked for, as you can see, for a number of years since 2015 on the Workplace Equality Index. And you can see here we've got our ranking up until 2019. We've not included 2020, which we do have a ranking for 2020 for last year. As you can see, we've always improved. We've always kind of gone up in the ranking of organisations that are assessed through this way. But I think there's still a lot more we can do. I think we have in 2020 we did get a little bit better, but not by much. So what we're doing as Staff Networks is really engaging with our DI&P colleagues to look at a clear action plan of delivery, to try to really embed a lot of what Stonewall is kind of recommending for us. And every time we put through a submission, we do have a very thorough feedback and follow-up meeting and report from Stonewall that really highlights what our priorities should be for the ongoing year. So as Staff Networks, we're always very engaged with this and invested. So we'll finish there. So thank you very much, and we'll open it up for any questions from anybody.
Jules, Stan, thank you. That was very fluent, very eloquent, very clear, and all power to you for the leadership that you're providing to this network as well. If colleagues could signal, and I'll call you in just as a way of managing this. Andrew Foster, you have got a comment in the chat box. Do you want to put it to Sam and Jules? And Sam and Jules, I'll let people ask you questions and then let you come in at the end when all the points have come out. But Andrew, do you want to kick us off in the discussion?
Sure. Thank you, Sir David. Yes, and I mean, huge congratulations to you both. First of all, an excellent presentation today, but sort of sitting behind that is a really energetic body of work that you're doing, and your network seems to have a really good traction. So my question really is, you're making obviously a lot of progress yourselves. Is there anything more that the board could do to help you?
Yeah. Okay, so let's collect that, and there's an offer for both of you, so I'm sure you'll not miss that opportunity. That's like you can use a football analogy, an open goal. So I'll let you kick the ball in the net to that. But Patrick Mitchell.
Thank you. Obviously a member of the community, but I'd never see myself as an activist or a role model. But I have to say, having attended Michael Brady's session and the Mind Out session, I was quite taken aback by the health issues that were presented there, and actually even some of the terminology that's used that I have to say I'm a bit embarrassed that I didn't know about it, considering I'm part of the, I suppose it's a broad community, so I can give myself a bit of an excuse not to know everything. But I think there's a huge amount to learn for that sort of session for the board in just some of the basics of neutral gender toilets, why Sam's asked about NX and those issues, because until you actually explore them and get into the depth of them, it really is quite well, it's just something I didn't know, and I felt I should have done. And the other thing, I put a blog out for the month just on my own career history, and I don't think people appreciate that, even now the prejudice that's out there is still great. I'm sure Sam and I just take it for granted that we'll occasionally get abused on the tube and walking down the street because that's just the way it is. But actually, I don't think people appreciate that that's what still happens and that we blank it off. But therefore, you can understand then when people come to work why they still have their guard up, where they don't want to necessarily feel safe to be out and bring them full selves to work. So I do think there's a lot to understand that people don't see on the surface, but it is actually still happening out there.
And I wonder whether, I don't know whether the Brady presentation might be something that could be made available more generally. It sounds like it was powerful, and there's learning for all of us from that, Patrick, as well. So maybe that's something.
I think Michael's stats were great, but I think the person who ran the Mind Out session was, if we could concertina that, there was some really powerful stuff in that around ill health and about people's behaviour at work, etc., that I think we could learn a lot from.
Okay, it's probably worth following up on. And Sam and Jules, I was interested in the bullet point you got about microaggressions and just a little bit more about that, because it's becoming increasingly clear to me that feeling safe in the workplace, one of the aspects of the lack of feeling safe are the microaggressions that come through, and how that can be very difficult to manage. And Patrick, you just alluded to that. Somebody of your seniority and experience is not protected from some of those. So it'd be worth just reflecting back on, in answer to Andrew Foster's question, is there more we can do as a board in relation to those? But Navina, you asked a question through the chat of Mark, I think, about vaccine uptake. And do you just want to do that? And then I'll come to you, Soraya, and Liz, and Andrew George.
Yeah, Mark, it just occurred to me, we hear a lot about vaccine uptake in different communities. Is there anything you can share about the uptake in the LGBTQ?
Yeah, thanks, Navina. And again, thanks, colleagues. Thanks, Julia and Sam, for your presentation today. So, yes, I mean, the short answer is there is some evidence internationally and, of course, emerging in the UK, particularly looking at different communities in terms of both access and hesitancy. And I think when we start to explore some of the issues around intersectionality, we start to see more emerging challenges, particularly amongst the healthcare and public health community, about our role in advocacy, importantly in accessing communities to look at some of the challenges both of information need, so if there's hesitancy about the vaccination itself, access and making sure that we're getting through to communities, and importantly making sure that we are being open and about some of the issues and challenges that there are, particularly around intersectionality of vaccine uptake. So there is a programme of work within the vaccine programme with the Health Inequalities team that is actively looking at both the issues around informational need and also the analysis of the data that's emerging from the vaccination programme to make sure that any redirection or any focused areas of work that need to be supported through public health are absolutely understood. So it is something I'll take back to the team, and maybe at a future board meeting we can present some of the information and data.
Okay, thanks. Soraya, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Sam and Julie. It was excellent. Could I just ask you, because I think it's really important for any board of an organisation to make sure that we've created a safe space for networks and for network chairs to be able to have those conversations. So my experience from other networks, that was just a critical factor, whichever network we talked about. So are there any challenges or issues that you think that actually we as a board should know about? And secondly, the importance of actually learning from some of the other organisations. So my own experience on one board is that they were way behind in terms of developing networks. They're catching up now. It's been really helpful for them to talk to other organisations, and obviously Stonewall was really helpful to them. So those two aspects, it'd be useful just to hear a bit more.
Great, thank you. Just get back to the order. Sorry, I was looking at the microaggressions website. I shouldn't be doing this, should I? I can't do two things at once. So Liz Meir, please.
Thanks, Sir David. Thanks, Sam and Jules. That was a fantastic presentation. You covered an awful lot of ground in that presentation, and it's really great to see this work going on and linking in with Best Place to Work, which we hope HE will be for everybody. So Andrew has asked a question about how the board can help, Andrew Foster. My question was about one of the slides. You said you encourage allyship and people to sort of align with the network. How would somebody within HE practically do that? Just a question about how somebody could get involved to understand lived experience, and also to ask for the slides to be circulated, because there were some great links in there that I'd love to click on and find out a bit more and think about, you know, how the board can practically help on an individual level as well as a collective level. So thank you. It was a fantastic presentation.
Andrew George.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I guess I've got two questions. One's building on Soraya's point around connecting to other bodies, and it's one of the things I've talked about before with some of the other networks, that I'm on the board of a very small arm's length body which just doesn't have the critical mass at this moment in time and helping. But so I am interested in your work. I mean, I know it's asking for you to do more work, but the extent of supporting across similar organisations that have a similar ethos. But then my substantive question is around the trainees, because my guess is that most of our trainees who are in universities or educational establishments are presumably their establishments have their policies and their support mechanisms, and we probably shouldn't interfere with that too much, otherwise it gets too confusing. But I guess our trainees who are more fluid, who are perhaps belong less to an institution, you mentioned that you were involved in some information gathering about their needs and what would support them. I'd just be interested to know whether we do anything formal there, or is there a gap in our provision there that we need to be aware of? Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. And I think what I'd be interested in is, you know, would it be helpful if the board began to adopt some of the language around the use of pronouns? I'm conscious that I haven't done that in my signature, but is that one way of actually demonstrating support to the agenda? I'd just be interested. It fits in Andrew Foster's question about what can we do. Some of those will be big things and some of them are actually quite small things, but I don't want to get into virtue signalling as well. So we've got to work out how to do this in a meaningful way. Listen, Jules and Sam, over to you. Don't feel you've got to go through these in order. I think this is a conversation that we need to have as a board, but there'll be things that you want to come back on and encourage us to do, and there might be one or two things that you want to discourage us from doing as well. So, you know, go for it. And we'll also have a conversation about how we can pick up and build on this conversation. I think Patrick's given some suggestion of what we might do as well, but I don't know how you want to play this between the two of you, but let me give you the next 10 minutes, I think, guys, and then I'll push on for the rest of the agenda. And we'll just finish this board a little bit later, and I'll shave it off the private board, which comes later, just to do justice to this conversation. So, Jules and Sam, last word to you both, please.
Thank you. Jules, I can jump in on a few of those points, if that's okay.
Yes, sure. And then I'll pick a few up after.
Yep, definitely. So I think the question, Andrew Foster, just on what the board can do, and I think, David, you've picked up on the use of pronouns. I think that's certainly something that we would look to encourage. So either using pronouns in your email signature formally. I think a lot of staff already at HE do this, and it's something we've worked on with a number of colleagues that would like to include their pronouns. But what we would always say is understand why. Why would you include your pronouns rather than just doing it, not using it as a tick box exercise? So what does that mean? Because it's providing visibility, and what are you kind of highlighting or putting a spotlight on by doing that? I think potentially a lot of formal meetings, when people introduce themselves, they will verbally express what pronouns they use, especially with meetings with external guests. That's another way to provide very active visibility to the use of pronouns and to be making sure that people who are non-binary or trans feel included. Also, maybe thinking about enhanced awareness training. So Patrick, I think you touched on that, making some of the training we've made available to all staff, maybe particularly available to yourselves as board members. I think that is a really great idea. And from that might kind of organically brings forward some kind of further work or further discussion points for you. Microaggressions, we did have a campaign, I think last year or the year before, on microaggressions with staff. So this was through posters in our offices. So I think actually looking at that again and how do we deliver that virtually, maybe kind of relaunch our kind of campaign around microaggressions, because it's not just focused on LGBT areas, it's also focused on BME issues, as well as discrimination based on your sex as well. So looking at that in a virtual world, I think would be a really good idea. Other organisations, so from the events we've actually done, I think that's kind of really made us think, actually, how can we maybe work with other arm's length bodies such as NHS England? And I think that's a conversation I'll be taking forward with Michael Brady at NHS England about how can we connect ourselves together in kind of the most kind of beneficial way, I think, rather than just trying to attend each other's meetings. What can we actually do that's meaningful across organisations? And just to touch on two of the points about allyship and trainee support. So I know that the DIMP team are working on a particular programme around how to become an LGBTQ plus ally in HE, and I think there's going to be some real key work coming out of that. And I know that Melanie in that team is leading on that work. She's one of our regional managers in that team. And finally, on trainee support, that's not something that we've really done as networks. We've kind of looked inward ourselves. And I think what Jules was saying earlier in the presentation, a lot of our networks are very new, only established within the last year or so. So it's almost let's get ourselves in order first. What can we do? How do we support our staff? And then kind of look outwards. And just to flag that actually the next event, which is the Pride and Practice event, we are opening that out to our trainees. We are advertising that with them. So if they would like to join, they are more than welcome to, and they've got the information and links on how to join that event. But I'll stop there, Jules, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'd like to just add something about on the trainee side, actually, because in the Northwest, we have quite an active EDI group with trainees led by one of our associate deans, Claire Inkster, and she's got roughly 80 to 100 trainees who are part of that group. And at the moment, there's a survey going on nationally that each of the regions has been asked to fill in. And I know Claire is completing it on behalf of the Northwest, gathering information about how we support trainees and learners, I think. So I'm not sure who's leading on that. Lee might know, but certainly that might provide some more information. But I've been along to a couple of meetings of our trainee group in the past, and one of the things that really struck me actually was the levels of discrimination that some of the trainees are facing on a day-to-day basis in the trusts that they work in. So working at HEE, actually, I personally find it a very safe space. I've never experienced myself any sort of challenges to my progression within the organisation or anything like that as a result of my sexual orientation. So I feel very lucky. But trainees were talking to me about their experiences of with some of the consultants on the wards and how they're actually choosing the specialties that they're going to move into because of how welcoming that they are to LGBT trainees. And really, you know, it's good that they can find a safer space, but they should be able to specialise in whatever that they're most skilled at or they're most interested in, rather than having to choose a specialty on the basis of where they feel most accepted. So I do think that there is work to be done there to support the trainees, and we're looking into running some training in the Northwest for our trainees around how to it's called active bystander training, so how to be able to challenge in the workplace, not just for the LGBT trainees but their colleagues as well, so that hopefully they can start to sort of influence some change from within. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could do, but I I do feel that is an area of concern for me personally. I work in training program management, so I guess that's feels quite pertinent. So that was the main other thing that I wanted to mention. Just to touch on one more thing, was that in terms of allies, we've found great support from allies in the North since we've set up. Probably in reality, the majority of the members of our network are allies. And we've seen people actively coming along, wanting to learn more about how they can be more inclusive in their working practice and with their team. So that's really positive to see. So I think the work that Sam spoke about, that Melanie Holloway's leading on, will be really beneficial to help with that. But we've also run some sessions in the North around the power of language, and we've had really good response to that. Actually, we've had over 100 people come to sessions, most of whom were not necessarily LGBT, but wanted to find out more about what they could do themselves. So it's really encouraging to see staff taking those steps. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks. Navina, do you want to say anything just by way of the last word on this, on next steps?
Thank you very much. That's been a really, thank you, Jules and Sam, really helpful, thought-provoking presentation and discussion. My to-do list is quite long. I think what I would like to, Patrick and I discussed this, and Sir David, you and I touched on it yesterday as well. And I think from the discussion we've had, there is an appetite for the board to lead by example and have a session to think about our own awareness and where we are as a board on all of this. And I think it would help then for us to work in the work that we do to lead in the organisation. So if I can take just one takeaway, if it's all right, that we would go away and arrange for that to happen.
Thank you, Navina. I'm particularly keen we do that. I feel I've lived with some of the issues throughout my career, but I do feel challenged by some of the newer discussions around gender fluidity, etc., gender reassignment and those things. And I for one would welcome an opportunity to learn more and to think more deeply about these issues. And I'm sure other colleagues would be as curious to learn, so we can actually support the work which is going on. So Navina, thank you for that. Jules and Sam, can I say thank you to you for the presentation that you brought today and for your leadership. Leadership is not about the title you've got, it's about the way that you behave and the values that you bring, and I think you're demonstrating real leadership in your work. And I know you've got co-chairs, and I think it's really interesting that during lockdown 3 groups have been developed and come into operation over this period. But I just want to thank you for all you do to contribute to create an organisation where we can all be the best we can be and bring our best selves to work. It's just so important. So thank you, and thanks for the remarkable clarity in the way that you presented today and answered the questions and comments that have been made. So thank you to you for that. And it sounds like there'll be further opportunities to have the conversation with the board as well as with your colleagues throughout the organisation. So thank you for that. And thank you to Patrick Mitchell as well for being so open in his leadership of being a member of that community. So thank you. Right, I'm going to move on. Jules and Sam, you're more than welcome to stay. If you've got other things that you want to leave to go on to do, that's also okay, but a big thank you. So I want to go on now to item 8, if I may, and I'll let this item run for 30 minutes, which is what it was scheduled for. So no, it wasn't. It's scheduled for 20. Anyway, let's see what we can do. We'll run for about 30. So it's about 15 and 15, just to give you an idea, Wendy and Callum, to manage time, and we'll play catch up in the private agenda. So Wendy, I think you were going to kick off in relation to the impact on postgraduate medical education and training of COVID, and just some of the issues that you're addressing, and share those with the board, acknowledging this is still work in progress. So Wendy, over to you, please.
Thank you very much to David, and thank you to Lee for putting together the slide set that we shared at the briefing into an elegant paper. Where we are now is that we know that COVID has had an impact on postgraduate medicine. I'm just going to focus on postgraduate medical training for the first part of this. Much of what we've heard is obviously anecdotal through our contacts with trainees, through the webinars, but we have, of course, been gathering data. And the first data set that we had was the ARCP, the annual review of training, which was done in the summer. And I think it's fair to say that if that had been the end of the pandemic, we would have felt confident that within our present structures and within the support that we can provide, we would have had relatively few extensions of training at that time. However, with the impact of the ongoing COVID caseload in the north and the significant surge that happened from the end of October, the impact on postgraduate medical trainees has been extended, and it does affect everyone, and I'll come on to that now. We know that training has been disrupted because we disrupted it. So from April onwards, we put in mechanisms that release trainees from their training programs to support the front line of COVID service. We released our trainers, academic trainees, people out of program. We brought as many people back into the NHS as was possible. We suspended all the normal formal training. Colleges suspended examinations. We did keep as much going as possible, and I'm grateful for the board's support around recruitment last year. However, we are now at the stage where we know that the number of trainees that have been formally redeployed has significantly increased in this phase. So we're around 40% of trainees that have been formally redeployed. I'm really keen that the board recognises that that is simply the mechanism by which we as the postgraduate deans sign off somebody physically moving to a new role in their hospital. That does not cover the majority of doctors whose focus has been entirely COVID. So say, for example, you're an orthopaedic surgeon that has not been formally redeployed, your ward is going to be full of patients suffering with COVID. So you are working in COVID and you are not experiencing your training. And I think what's really important and what's emerging is the difference between gaining a competency, i.e. learning to do something and being satisfactory at that. So, surgical procedure or a medical procedure, but also the experience of learning within the NHS is completely different. And that richness of being part of a clinical team, part of a normal clinical process has been disrupted. And that's for all staff, that's not just for postgraduate trainees. And that is a really important thing that we're picking up. So, for example, I spoke to a group of psychiatry trainees who have not been frontline during COVID. They have not been working on critical care. However, their whole clinical world has been disrupted. And we need to recognise that the reset of the NHS is going to be about much more than just providing people with single opportunities to catch up. So we've been looking at this through the reporting and the qualitative data. We now have emerging quantitative data. And the first lens that we're looking through is the recruitment that we're in the middle of now. We have continued with a very streamlined recruitment process, working closely with individual specialties, not just individual colleges, but all of the 109 specialties, so that we can recruit remotely. We are now on what is known as Plan B, which is a very remote recruitment process with as many people as possible recruited through video interviews, etc., etc. That allows us to see the applicant numbers. And this year, of course, we have an increased number of applicants for entry into training at both core and higher level. And that's because, of course, people can't go away. So no one's taking a break. No one's going out of programme. No one's going into research because the research market is very, very, very slow to get moving again. And indeed, we have more applicants than ever because we have an increased number of international medical graduates able to apply due to the visa rules in 2019. So we've got a really big pool of people wanting to train and work in the NHS. And one of the risks that we've identified is a potential for fewer posts to be put forward at this stage in the recruitment cycle, because our training programme directors, who themselves are consultants and GPs and often working in the front line, so that they're doing this job now without much of the time that we would normally devote to it, and they're not identifying as many vacant posts. And the reason for that is a lot of anxiety around what will people need to catch up in training. I don't want to over-egg this at this time, because at this stage in the recruitment cycle, we're always anxious about where are the posts and how do they look. But it is the first time we've got real data to see the potential gap in our aspiration to bring doctors into training and the opportunities that may have. Now, one of the ways in which we're doing the sort of scrutiny of this is by working obviously with individual colleges, the academy, the GMC, and of course our colleagues in NHS I&E and our DH colleagues. So we've done a lot of briefing, a lot of sharing of information. And where we are at the moment is that one of the things that we in HEE can do, so our responsibility, is that we can run more recruitment cycles. So that, say, for example, trainees need more time, then they don't have to wait another year, because we have an annual recruitment cycle. They don't have to wait another year to get into training. We can therefore offer people that glimpse of their career rolling out over a 12-month period rather than having to wait. That's a hugely important offer. We've spoken obviously to a number of trainees, but also to formal training organisations such as the JDC who support that. And we're working through the mechanics of that in a parallel meeting to today's board, because this is obviously a 4-country issue and it's governed by the regulations. But that's a hugely important offer. The board will recognise that we are good at that because we've done that in order to increase the number of doctors entering GP over the last 3 years. So we understand the mechanisms for that. And it will not have a significant impact on the service because we will continue to do it in this light touch way as we are at the moment. The second thing that we've agreed to do is to try and, I suppose, make this into bite-sized quantified risk. And we need to look, therefore, at the transition points for doctors in training. And first of all, that's those doctors in their final year, because the doctors in their final year of training last year at the beginning of the pandemic were in their penultimate year. And so they could be seen to have had the biggest hit, if you like, in their experiences and their opportunities to learn. If we don't make sure that they have the right skills and competencies to exit training with their CCT, the pipeline will be blocked. That's a very simplistic view of it, but that's really what we're looking at. There are lots of mechanisms by which we can improve their access to training, and it's really key to do that hand in hand with colleagues who are looking at the reset of the NHS service. And those are the conversations we've been having with Steve Powers and Senior Clark in NHS I&E, and indeed with Amanda Pritchard and Julian Kelly. So what we have agreed is that the postgraduate deans will do a training needs assessment of all those doctors in their final year. And obviously that's being massively supported by individual specialties and colleges who know the detail of what individuals need. And we have continued to work with the GMC with the derogations of some of the regulations that allow us that flexibility. So that's the sort of scene for the next few months. As we get through the rest of the assessments of training needs through the other years, starting with those transitional years, so core to higher will be the next group, we will then be able to see the scale of what's required to help people get their training back on track. And I would reiterate that that is competencies and confidence, and the two go together. We don't think that there is a one size fits all, so let's not extend everybody for X amount of time, because indeed there are some doctors who have not only enhanced their competencies during the COVID pandemic, but have increased their confidence, and they should not be held back. And I think the balance between that is really important, and that's why this becomes almost a personalised training offer. Obviously, we need to aggregate that up so that Callum and I can work on what this will cost and where that investment will come from. And that's a huge part of our work. And we've already shared, I think, the risk and our anxieties and our process for getting that data successfully with colleagues around the system. So before I finish, I'd just like to touch on medical students, because some of the board wanted to know about medical students, and that they're not included in this paper. Primarily, the medical students in England are back on track with huge amounts of work from our colleagues in medical schools and supported by our team here. We are confident that we will not see a significant number of medical students unable to graduate in the summer as expected. There are a lot of reasons for that, and those of you that are medics will know that we have a number of opportunities in a final year of medical school, such as electives. Well, they're obviously not happening, so medical schools are very creatively using those to help students catch up with the learning that they've missed. Clinical placements, we really have worked very hard, and I'm very grateful to colleagues in regions to protect those. And we are obviously not going to be running the FI1 programme this year as we were able to last year in support of the NHS, because simply those students will not be able to graduate early. So we are on track. We're not expecting a significant loss of students graduating for the foundation programme this year. We are working with Callum on a suggestion from the medical schools and from my team that we increase the shadowing prior to foundation for this group of trainees, because they simply will have had less experience in a normal clinical setting prior to starting work as F1s. There's a significant cost attached to that, which we have done all the due diligence on, but we would like to increase the shadowing week from 1 week to 2 weeks, and Callum is working with colleagues in the DHSC and NHS England to see how we could possibly help that happen. But just to reassure people that we are equally committed to watching what's happening with the progress of the undergraduate population. David, I'll finish there. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Wendy. And it's really important just to map out what the risks are and what the approach is. So does anybody want to come in on this? I'm not going to turn this into a question and answer session, but are there points that you think Wendy should be considering? So I'm looking to non-executive director colleagues in the first instance. So Andrew Foster, I think, first, and then Soraya, please.
Yeah, I've put briefly in the chat box that what Wendy has outlined is a fantastically responsive approach from HEE to the multiple needs for flexibility from trainees, and how those are going to vary enormously according to the individuals themselves, their specialties, and what their experience has been. I guess what I'm asking is about whether the response is going to be good. I'm sure that bodies like the Royal Colleges and GMC and so on will respond well to this, but I wonder about employers who will have their own pressures. I wonder about NHS E&I who will have their own imperatives to recover. How do you see the response to this request for flexibility?
Okay, let me gather them all, Wendy, and then you can come back and because I don't want to erode Mark's slot as well. Soraya, please.
Just a question, Wendy, if I may. Trainees that were in flexible programmes, has there been a differential impact on them? And a second question around really what communication are we going to do back to trainees? Because I think it's really critical. At the moment, trainees I've spoken to are, quite concerned and they're worried. This is probably not final year. These are obviously lower down, but really making sure that we've got the communication right there, because there will be variation, I'm sure, in terms of how this is managed locally.
Thanks, Soraya. Andrew Morris.
Thanks, David. Just a small point, Wendy, around annual leave and study leave. So as part of the kind of flexible approach that you're adopting here, just need to make sure that trainees take their outstanding leave and any study leave that they've got due, because I think as a good employer, and it comes back to this tension between employers and people in the service, we do need to look after these guys and really, really support them through. So this would be, a really small gesture around ensuring that people do take what's owing to them. But I think it's something we should do as an organisation that looks after people's well-being.
Andrew George.
A side issue for Andrew Morris on that one in terms of the leave. The acute trusts I've been listening to have been very keen that we can see that leave flexibly. In other words, can they actually take it back over 3 years rather than all taking it back over the next year, for fairly obvious reasons on both sides of the argument. But to go to Wendy's, you talked a lot about the skills, quite rightly, about the skills that are needed. And you and I have also talked about, wider issues and what it means to be a doctor, and all of that. Have we thought through how people's attitudes to being a doctor, the virtues that they might espouse and so on, have been altered for good or ill as a result of this pandemic? And do we need to think perhaps a little bit more considerately about whether we need to be explicit about that? Thank you.
Okay, Harpreet.
Thanks, David. And just building on the great work, Wendy, that's been put forward, I wanted to pick up one of your buckets, which was on the reform side of things, and using this opportunity to also see what is potentially working or may not be working, and how we're learning from that as we think about the new paradigm that's been put together, in whether it's through recruitment, whether it's through how we train and provide the competency and skill base, but whether it's from the surgical lens, the virtual simulations versus what this might mean for primary care and other secondary care specialities. I think this seems like a unique moment for us to bring some of those learning together in that reform bucket that you mentioned in your 3 category lists.
Okay, thanks, colleagues. Wendy, briefly, please, because we're up against time. And as I say, as you said, this is work in progress, and you're still creating the programme of work that needs to be taken forward. So I don't think we need to be definitive, but there's some good, I think, points made by colleagues in this conversation. So if you wouldn't mind just briefly, please.
Yes, of course. So Andrew Morris, the response from employers, I think this is really key to the work that we're doing both nationally, regionally and locally, Andrew. And I was really pleased to hear that from some of our regional teams that where they have got their reset boards up and running, they are looking towards what training needs there are, not just in postgraduate trainings, but also CPD and all of that. So I think what we need to do is make sure that reset plans look at the opportunities that trainees needing to catch up gives them, as opposed to just doing it based on the consultant staff needed. And I think there are some opportunities. So if, for example, you're doing your surgical catch up in an independent sector and you're doing 100 HIPs, well, those 100 HIPs, 60 of them could be done by a trainee. We are working very closely to make sure that contractually and regulatory wise we've got approval to do that, and we are in that space with the independent sector. So I think this is going to be really down to our local teams, our heads of school, our training program directors and our deans to make sure that they remind and work with our colleagues that the reset isn't just the waiting lists, it's also the catching up of training. In terms of annual leave and study leave, the problem with study leave is that there isn't anything to take your study leave for at the moment because the exams are all suspended, and we are really working with there's a committee at the academy that looks at study leave, and as you know, we have more control over how study leave is utilised since the industrial action agreements. So we're working very hard to make sure that we understand what study leave will need to look like, because preparing for an exam isn't just taking a week off and reading the books, because the exams are very much based in clinical experience now. So we are looking at what that will have to be over the next 2 to 3 years rather than a between now and August. And that, I think, is a really sensible approach for study leave. And we are, of course, encouraging trainees to work with their employers to take their annual leave, and have been throughout the pandemic, not to hang on to their annual leave. Comms to trainees, we do a weekly comms out on the website and blogs, and I've got various people doing Twitter talks and other things, so we're putting out lots and lots of comms, Soraya. We're also doing some national comms. There will be some comms from the Secretary of State to all doctors soon, I understand, but Steve and I have agreed that we will write a letter to be sent out just reminding people of the importance of education and training of postgraduate doctors and how that can support reset. We're just thinking the timing of that, Andrew Morris, because I think landing that at the right time is really important. And at the moment, I think and I should have said earlier that we have to realise that there's still over 20,000 inpatients with COVID, and an awful lot of people whose minds are completely set on that. They're not thinking about their next exam or their next leave. They're thinking about the next shift that they're doing. So we are doing lots of comms. The flexible trainee issue is really interesting, Soraya, and we've asked that question, but we've not been aware that we've had any significant detriment to trainees working less than full-time during this. What we are aware of is an increasing number of inquiries about I might want to work less than full-time, and we do think that with the success of the less than full-time programmes that we've got, we're going to see a significant number of doctors want to work in a different way in the future. And that leads me into the attitudes of a doctor altered by the pandemic. I think fundamentally society has been altered by this pandemic, Andrew, and I think if we don't reflect on that as an organisation, you know, it's got education in its title, we're missing something. I'm really keen that the profession doesn't just go back to what it was. And I think one way into that at the moment, we're in the teeth of perhaps the operational end of that, is to actually reflect on why we do recruitment in this way. Why is assessment like this? What is the end point of these set pieces that are talismanic in the life of a doctor? I mean, we all remember our membership exams. You know, I still remember what I wore. You know, it's that's 100 years ago. So those talismanic events, I think, Andrew, can get us into that space, and that is part of. This is reform, and this is what we are driving. So we need to take the best bits from our performance in COVID and really chew them over and say, what does that give us as a reform for the future? This does fit. I mean, COVID is, you know, the people that supported COVID as doctors were those doctors in their first 5 or 6 years. They are the front line. And our opportunity to enhance their learning and their professionalism through the generalist school approach is absolutely made for a pandemic. So we have a ton of enthusiasm around the reform agenda there. And indeed, you know, we've shared this with Chris Whitty and others. So we're not neglecting reform. It's not sitting somewhere separate to this. This is our way into that next stage of reform. So you know, this is, if you like, the first chapter of reform is how we reset after COVID, would be my way of phrasing it.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on. Mark, over to you, please, for the next report. And I think you've already had the question posed from Andrew. So, just pull out the highlights for us, Mark, on the work that you've been doing on this agenda, please.
Of course. Thanks, Sir David and board colleagues. So the paper is included in the pack, which gives the details. So the first thing is to say thanks to our students, our educators, universities across the system. This has been a hugely disruptive year for many of them, but I have to, you know, personally thank their fortitude and perseverance and also support for the NHS and social care during this time, and the flexibilities that they've delivered in relation to being responsive to the needs of the service, but also the continuity of their academic work as well. As the paper highlights, we are continuing to focus on the support of students, notably with the change of the emergency standards, which were introduced again on the 14th of January. What the pack identifies is that we are working in extreme partnership ways with many, many stakeholders across the system. And I just have to note personally our colleagues at the NMC who have been hugely supportive and flexible in terms of the arrangements, in terms of doing that. The university organisations, notably the Council of Deans, engaging with their support of their networks to make sure that we can introduce and support student flexibility where possible. And of course our union colleagues who through their networks and also our student leader groups have been really helpful in terms of making sure that we shape policy in line with student need and universities, but also feeding back where things aren't working well, and we are able to respond quite quickly and rapidly to any emerging concerns from students. What the paper highlights is that because of the flexibilities and also the work our regional colleagues are doing, we have seen our first year students in the main are out into supervised practice, obviously with the flexibilities that the pandemic has had across the different parts of the country, means that these flexibilities are being decided by universities and NHS provider organisations. This is positive. So we know that this year we had a large number of students arriving. We saw a 27% increase in the number of undergraduate nurses starting after the work we've been doing across the system to boost domestic supply. And so it's really important those students gain some clinical experience, and it's good to see in the data that actually a large number of those students are out in clinical practice, and only a few universities have decided to step and pause their placement programs. And of course our second years, and I think the second year group are a really important group to understand. I was just calculating, they've never known anything other than a pandemic, other than 2 months of their training between probably October and November in 2019. So these group are really important to understand in terms of their experiences and their progression, particularly in terms of their disruption. So it's good to see that large proportion of universities are progressing with their placement. Again, I think, as Wendy has rightly pointed out, the pandemic is a rich learning experience, but it is also very challenging for students as well, which I'll come on to in a moment. And as you can see, because of the flexible arrangements we've been doing with our regions, our university sector and our provider trusts, we are having the majority of students out in clinical practice on varying arrangements, from paid placements where appropriate to mixed models, and of course in many cases students continuing out onto placement. Now the main aim of this, of course, is we have over 60,000 student nurses across England working with 71 universities, so and many different year groups and branch programs and a variety of different variations. So it is a really complex patchwork of support requirements going into the system that we've engaged on. So we're keeping a close eye on many aspects of this, notably student experience, as well as also importantly, we're looking at issues such as attrition from course. We're not seeing in the data yet that emerging as an issue, but we're mindful of that being a potential risk because of the pressures that students are under. Before I finish for questions, I kind of want to look at the medium to long-term strategy here. We have been clear that there is always a residual risk that some students will be delayed going into their final year of the programme. So we're working with the department, DFE, the university sector, and also importantly our partners at the NMC on any mitigations we need to put into place to ensure students can graduate on time to get them into the health and social care workforce. So there are some further developments and policy support around standards that we're working on with the NMC that will enable that flexibility, which will be published in due course. But of course, the recovery of their education and onward progression into the workforce is quite mission critical. So there are several mitigations that we are putting into place and working with partners. Some of this sits with the system, with the education institutes, as well as also with other partners, including DFE, to support us with. And we've got a fairly rapid and robust meeting framework and higher education task force that we share with DHSC and DFE weekly to ensure that these issues are addressed. And the final issue, of course, is resilience and support of the system, knowing well that the NHS recovery alongside the educational recovery are intrinsically linked, as Andrew's rightly pointed out, to make sure that we've got those things in place. We are mindful of the stresses and pressures this adds to students, both in terms of their mental health and their experience on course progression. So we, again, are actively working with the partners in relation to that. And of course, a focus on expansion, knowing that we have robust expansion last year due to the work we've done across many partnerships to boost domestic supply as part of the 50,000 nurse programme sponsored by the Department of Health and Social Care. And this year does look like, again, our work is bearing fruit in terms of further expansion. UCAS are due to publish later today the data in relation to the expansion of the undergraduate programmes again, and we're mindful that the wider understanding and benefits of working in healthcare are definitely boosting interest in people wanting to come in there. So we will continue to work with the university sector on a number of areas of work, both notably our current student populations, recovery of those students and onward career progression, as well as also future stability and resilience of the education sector to boost and support domestic supply of nurses, midwives and AHPs within the UK and England. So I'll pause there. I'm very happy to take questions.
Mark, brilliant. Thank you. Very, very clear. Now, I've chaired this terribly. We're way over, but I want to do absolute justice to this. Allow people time for personal comfort before we go on to the workshop this afternoon as well. So, Mark, I'm going to invite people to make comments. I'm not going to invite you to respond to them, so I know you'll pick them up. And then, colleagues, I'm going to move on quickly. So please make your comment. That's not a way of shutting this down, but I am really going to race us through the private board meeting. So John Latham first, and then Liz, and then Andrew George. Are you on mute, John?
Sorry.
Share it with us, please.
Very good. I just totally agree with Mark. My biggest risk actually is the interest in people coming in. So we've just had our January intake. We had a stretch target we didn't think we'd meet. We ended up at 190% of that target. So, you know, we do see a huge amount of interest of people coming into the sector. And I think it's, you know, it really is something we need to think about and how we will manage. If it continues at the rate of growth we're seeing, then we're going to have a glut of people who want to come in, and it would be a real shame not to be able to respond.
It's a really important point. Having Mark, just heed Mark's words about the interest that there is this year as well. He said it as beautifully as any politician could. There's a lot of interest, is I think what he said.
Huge.
Liz Meyer.
Hi, so my point was the total opposite of that, actually. So thanks, Mark and colleagues, for a great paper and all the work you're doing and the flexibilities that you're promoting for trainees. So one of the newspapers ran an article this weekend about there won't be interest in future. so I was going to ask what are we basing that on? But hearing what John said, that's really encouraging. But there was this report was run that there won't be interest. People are wanting to pull out. So interesting to see what happens.
There you go. We still insist on seeing the future, don't we, if we haven't learned this year. But Andrew George.
So I'm about influencing the future, I guess. Picking up in a way Wendy's response to my comment around using this the opportunity to drive change that we need to and want to drive, and just inviting you to think about how you're doing that on the nursing side, which you probably are, but it'd be interesting here someday. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Soraya.
Thank you, Mark. Just a very quick question. It's sort of the question around retention and the issues we know that we have with retention with qualified nurses and the opportunities for postgraduate development. Is there an eye on that? And have we also picked up any differences in terms of cultural sensitivities and cultural differences around either retention or issues with student nurses at the moment?
Okay, do you want to come back on any bit more? Your last word.
So just perhaps Soraya's point to David, if I may, because I think it's a really helpful one, but other colleagues' points I'll pick up. But I think many of them work in the same space about the kind of attracting interest and how we manage that. But yes, there's an active programme in support of that. So it's a really, really important point that we need to kind of focus on in terms of the kind of students themselves. And we're working hand in glove with NHS England and Improvement, particularly with Perena and Ruth. Because there is a very clear transition point between becoming a student into a newly qualified nurse. And whilst we have preceptorship programmes, there is something about more work need to be done, particularly as the turnover in that group is much higher than the wider nursing population. And a lot of that boils down to kind of work expectation, the support infrastructure that's in place, as well as also importantly areas such as pastoral support and understanding. So there is a real requirement in the early 2 to 3 years worth of that transition. We we have the repair programme, and actually it does blend a little bit between finishing as a student and entering the workforce. And John, who leads that programme for us, directly links in with the retention programme to make sure that that support is in place. And of course, we have done a number of surveys in relation to students during the pandemic. We're due to repeat that, and within that shows there's a differential between the professions. So the lowest level of stress and pressure within student groups is in AHPs. That is actually much higher in midwives, student midwives, than it is our student nurses, and there is a definite impact of our BME students in that they have higher levels of challenge and issues within their course program. So we're continuing to work and understand more detail, engage with systems and universities and student groups to really kind of make sure that those issues are really mitigated. But you're right, absolutely, we can't see this as a kind of end point at the end of qualification. We have to see that as a kind of a part of the entire career flow all the way through, and that's something we do with Ruth and Parena.
Okay. Wendy, Mark, thank you both for the reports and the response to the points that have been made. This is a massive issue, I think, about how we secure the pipeline and what impact COVID has had on people's education and training. I think it's hugely important that we've had this conversation today. I'm sorry to kind of rush you through it in a way, but I think it's hugely important. Not only have we had the conversation, we've had it publicly, so we can signal to students, to employers, to our colleagues these important issues. And there aren't easy solutions to this, but I think what I'd want people to take away from this conversation is that you were both providing the leadership and working incredibly hard to make sure we can secure this pipeline. So there's going to be lots. I think the phrase is it will be a bumpy road, which seems to be somewhat of an understatement, but it is hugely important that we're open and transparent in the way that we have this conversation. So thank you both for the work that you've done to lead this, but also thank you to board colleagues for carrying this conversation forward in a public board meeting, which is recorded, and therefore a wider sequence of stakeholders can actually join in this conversation. And I know it's being tweeted out from this meeting, so I hope that encourages people to come back with their comments as well. So it's not just a conversation between the members of the board, but it's a wider conversation amongst those stakeholders. So thank you for that. I haven't been notified of any other business, so I'm going to close this meeting. So if I could ask you, Nicola, to end the live recording. While that is being done, I think the red button has gone. Listen, I've done this terribly. We've got a 12:15